when a government negates the law of God, it abrogates its authority. God has given certain offices to restrain chaos in this fallen world, but it does not mean that these offices are autonomous. And when a government commands that which is contrary to the law of God, it abrogates its authority. The whole history of the Christian church, and again, I wish people knew their history. And again, in a Christian manifesto, I stress what happened in the Reformation in reference to all this. At a certain point, it is not only the privilege, but it is the duty of the Christian to disobey the government. Now, that's what the founding fathers did when they founded this country. That's what the early church did. That's what Peter said. You heard it from the Scripture. Should we obey man rather than God? That's what the early Christians did. Often, people say to me, but the early church didn't practice any civil disobedience. Didn't they? You don't know your history again. When those Christians that we all talk about so much allowed themselves to be thrown into the arena, when they did that, from their view it was a religious thing. They would not worship anything except the living God. But you must recognize from the side of the Roman state there was nothing religious about it at all. It was purely civil. The Roman Empire had disintegrated to the only unity it had was this worship of Caesar. You could be an atheist. You could worship the Zoroastrian religion. You could do anything. They didn't care. It was a civil matter. And when those Christians stood up there and refused to worship Caesar from the side of the state, they were rebels, they were in civil disobedience, and they were thrown to the beast. They were involved in civil disobedience. As much as your brothers and sisters in the Soviet Union are tonight, when the Soviet Union says by law they cannot tell their children, even in their home, about Jesus Christ, and they must disobey, and they get sent off to the mental ward or to Siberia. Exactly the same kind of civil disobedience that's represented in a very real way by the thing I'm wearing on my lapel tonight. Every appropriate legal and political governmental means must be used. But the final bottom line, I've invented this term in a Christian manifesto, and I hope that Christians across this country and across the world will really understand what the Bible truly teaches. The final bottom line, the early Christians, every one of the reformers, and again I'll say in a Christian manifesto I go through country after country and show that there was not a single place, with the possible exception of England, where the Reformation was successful where there wasn't civil disobedience and disobedience to the state. Well, we must realize the bottom line, the early Christians, the people of the Reformation, the founding father of this country faced and acted on, is the realization that if there is no place for disobeying the government, that government has been put in the place of the living God. In such a case, the government has been made a false god. If there is no place for disobeying a human government, that government has been made God. Caesar, under some name, thinking of the early church, has been put upon the final throne. The Bible's answer is no. Caesar is not to be put in the place of God. And we as Christians, in the name of the Lordship of Christ in all of life, must so think and act on the appropriate level, and should always be on the appropriate level. We have lots of room to move yet with our cases, with our court cases, with the people we elect, all the things that we can do in this country. In the name of the Lordship of Christ in all of life, we must so think and act on the appropriate level. And if unhappily we come to that place, the appropriate level must also include a disobedience to the state. If you're not doing that and you haven't thought it through, Jesus is not really on the throne. God is not central. You have made a false God central. Christ must be the final Lord, and not society, and not Caesar. May I repeat the final sentence again? Christ must be the final Lord, and not Caesar, and not society.